Good afternoon, and thank you for participating in today's webinar, CRM Health Check, Boosting Dynamics 365 Performance. So a little about Forvis Mazars. Forvis Mazars is an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the U.S., our team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services for clients in all 50 states and internationally. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems and sales and marketing CRM systems. Our end-to-end solutions help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we'll be focusing on the CRM application, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Sales. Our presenters today are Lauren Pode and Tom Gioeli. Lauren is a senior consultant at Forvis Mazars with more than 10 years of experience in the IT industry with a focus on Microsoft Dynamics. She has experience performing business needs assessments, managing consulting and customer service teams, as well as providing Microsoft Dynamics project management, implementation, and training services. Prior to joining the firm, she worked for a financial software company as a Dynamics client service manager. Currently, she holds several designations for Microsoft, including Dynamics 365 Sales Functional Consultant, Dynamics 365 Customer Service Functional Consultant, and Power Platform Functional Consultant, and is a Microsoft Certified Professional. Tom is a Senior Managing Consultant at Forvis and also is a Microsoft Certified Professional. He specializes in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Sales, Field Service, Power Automate, and Power BI. He has 10 years of experience working with CRM software, conducting analysis, design, and implementation projects, and previously worked as a CRM admin. He helps clients design their CRM systems to fit their business needs, promote user adoption, and streamline business processes. Again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. Now I will turn over the presentation to Tom.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. So glad to have all of you here with us. Starting off here today, I just want to take a minute or two to run through really the goals and the topics that we're going to be covering in this webinar, and then I'm going to pass it right on over to Lauren to start hitting on some of these first ones. But really what we wanted to discuss here today is how to make sure that your CRM system is kept healthy and up to date. One of the really tough parts about this is that there's probably about 500 different things that you can be doing. Each one really contributes to really the overall health of your CRM application and making sure that you have a really good understanding of what's going on underneath the hood. What we want to talk about here today, though, are some of those quick and easy items, maybe some of the ones that you haven't necessarily thought of, to help you make sure that you're keeping your CE application healthy, moving forward, and serving not only your customers, but all of your internal needs as well for those users. So first of all, we're going to talk about how you can set up some of those key performance indicators and really start focusing on how you want to define your data quality, the modifications and customizations that you make to your system, and what types of integrations you can utilize to help make sure that that data stays clean and up to date. Next, we're going to take a look about how you can actually take a look under the hood of your CRM application to understand what's customized, what's out of box, really what changes have been made to your application over time. And then finally, we'll talk about how you can perform data audits, assess your data quality, and deal with things like duplicate records, missing information, or inconsistencies across the application. Hopefully, everyone comes away learning at least a couple of new things here today. If you do have questions as we're going throughout, please don't hesitate to throw them into the chat and we'll answer them as soon as we can. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and toss it right over to Lauren. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So, like Tom said, we're going to get started today. And really, the first thing that we're going to talk about is just how to set up your dynamics in a way that makes it user friendly and also contributes to data quality and data integrity using modifications to the out of the box setup, any customizations, and also integrations, as was mentioned. To get started, we do have a quick polling question, and then we will jump right in.
Give people a minute to lock in their response for how clean do you think your Dynamics 365 environment is? Is it immaculate? Could use a spring cleaning or back to school refresh? Time to roll up your sleeves before it gets too bad? Or college dorm room, my favorite answer. Needs some serious work in the data cleanliness avenue.
I guess it can always depend on whose dorm room as well, right? I think maybe I was thinking of mine, which was probably not great. Looking back on that, I'm sure Lauren's was much neater than mine would have been over time there.
Depends on if it was the beginning of the school year or the end of the
That's
school year.
true. That's true,
Finals,
right?
yeah.
Right before Parents'
Right,
Weekend. I
exactly.
mean, yeah,
Hmm.
there were a few times it got cleaned up there. Just, oh,
I'll say as a marketer, I love when it's immaculate. That makes me happy.
right.
Hmm. Very
All
true.
right, results are in.
All right. So it looks like a lot of you feel like yours could use a spring cleaning, and then some of yours is pretty bad. Only a few of you think it's immaculate, but if it's immaculate, that's that's great. And hopefully these tips you already know about, or maybe you can implement some new ones that will further contribute to how clean it already is. All right. So just to get started, just again, a couple of things that I think help, especially when you're first setting up dynamics. I think that a lot of times you have to weigh the just because we can doesn't mean we should, kind of take that approach to it. So just because we can customize our system, are these customizations truly needed? And if we take a step back and we think about data integrity in general, there are certain aspects of dynamics that are set it and forget it. There's certain settings you can kind of turn on and you really don't have to revisit those settings over time. But data integrity really should be looked at as an ongoing and consistently practiced process, not just a one time thing. So we can put all of these measures in place that we're going to talk through, but we can still see, and we'll still see that duplicates or bad data sneaks in there over time. So it's good to have a regular cadence and just have ways that you are preventing that data integrity from going downhill, but also towards the end, we'll talk about ways to do some cleanup if you realize that it has gotten out of control. All right, so to start, we'll talk about custom fields. So this is something that I think everyone appreciates about Dynamics. It's great that we can customize the system, that we can make it fit your business process, but we want to make sure not to over customize and not to build out something custom for something that Dynamics already has a solution for out of the box. So custom fields, when we're thinking about adding them, we want to think about how often will they be utilized. So is it something that's worth adding, or are we creating a field that is not really going to be used by the whole team, may be confusing to certain users, so they either don't know what data to put in there, they use it as their own sort of data or their own sort of field to track whatever data they want to track. And then over time, that field becomes less and less reliable because maybe it's not something that was needed in the first place, or it's not something that was going to be utilized as much as we thought. So find your threshold. Maybe, if this isn't going to be utilized in 80% of situations, maybe we don't add it as a custom field and we find a better way to track that altogether. Next would be required fields. So you can create or set system fields as required. So custom fields or system fields can be set as required, but you want to think through the user's process before you do that. So we can't just say, oh, well, I'll make sure users are filling out all the data correctly because I'll just make it required. Because you kind of have to think through the user's experience and their process that they're going through as they're entering the data. So when I create a lead for the first time, I may only know the first name and the last name, and hopefully I have at least a business phone number or an email address. But if I only have one or the other, an email address is always required, then I'm forcing my users to put in a dummy email address and then contributing to unclean data. So you can use business rules to make certain fields required conditionally, or you can, if it does make sense, such as first name, last name, make it always required. But it's just something to ask yourself, before we start making fields required, which we think will help with data integrity, is that going to force users to just put in anything they can to bypass the system? Or it could even lead to users getting frustrated with the system and choosing to track their leads in Excel because they can't put in the data that they want in Dynamics, or when they try to, they keep getting error messages. Another thing when it comes to required fields is just the location on the form. That can really contribute to a positive or negative user experience. So when you're building out your forms, if you're creating custom fields or if you're updating a system field to be required, it's a good practice to have that be on the first tab of that form, kind of the default tab, so that when they go to save the record, they're not getting this warning that they have a required field they forgot to fill out, and then they're having to go fish around on the form for where is this field that I'm supposed to fill out. So just again, contributing to positive user experience and contributing to users knowing where the fields are that they want to update, where the fields are that they need to update, why they need to update them, and then that will help ensure that the fields are being populated accurately and appropriately every time, and it's not we're not contributing to data quality or data integrity issues. Another one is lookups and option sets as opposed to just a text field. So there are some fields that it makes sense to have a text field because the data in those fields could vary greatly. So we definitely don't want to box our users into selecting data that doesn't necessarily make sense when they're filling out records. But a text field does allow them to type in whatever they want, and you need to ask yourself, is this something that we need to report on? And if we make it a text field, is it going to be something that's easily reported on? Or does it need to be maybe an option set or a lookup? So for an example, job title is a field that could vary greatly. Even just in our organization, there's so many different job titles that you could have. So that's probably not something that you want to create a lookup for or a drop down for. That would be, I think, fine to have an open text field in most scenarios. But the state field, for example, so out of the box, state field is just a text field. And then you have some users that enter NC, you have some users that enter North Carolina. And then when you're trying to report on it, you're hoping that you got every variation of the state of North Carolina. But if it's a text field, then users technically can put whatever they want. They can misspell it accidentally. There's just so many different scenarios. So creating or updating that field to be a lookup, or if you're creating a new custom field and it's a similar scenario, creating a lookup instead of a text field if it's not something that's going to be changing very often, and it doesn't have a huge list of options. A lookup or an option set is maybe going to be a better option, especially when it comes to, again, that reporting and just trying to parse through the data that you're asking your users to enter. All right, so then Dynamics templates. So this is something that I feel like may be underutilized. I don't know if you guys are using templates in your site, but Dynamics templates really do help with, first of all, again, that positive user experience. It reduces data entry. If they've just created a new account in Dynamics and now they have a new client form to go fill out, if they fill it out in Dynamics and then they have to go also fill it out outside of Dynamics, is there a way to kind of merge the two? So it also helps with reducing user error. So Word templates are kind of what I was just talking about. So that can be helpful for creating those standardized documents. You can use the Dynamics data, so whatever they've entered in on the account or whatever field or whatever table it is that they're populating, and then they can just grab a Word template where they've predefined dynamic values that can pull in the field from the table in Dynamics into the Word document and kind of fill out that form for them. And then from there, they can email it, print it, save it as a PDF, whatever they need to do. But again, it helps reduce that data entry error because instead of them having to type it all out, it's all coming directly from Dynamics. So they just have to enter it in once, and then we can take that data wherever it needs to go from there. Email templates are the same way. So again, it saves time. It provides that standardization that clients are seeing when they're receiving emails. Maybe there's a thank you email that you send once you close a deal, for example. If you have that email template created, you could apply that email template. It might pull in specifics about the client, and then you can also personalize it and then send it on its way. But using those templates just reduce your or keeps your users from having to type a ton of information every time and potentially misspelling a word or grabbing the wrong information. And it also, again, provides a more positive user experience because we're saving them a lot of time by giving them templates to reference. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Tom to talk about some integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the great things about Microsoft Dynamics as a platform is that you really aren't limited to just what's in your CE application. You can connect into these outside sources and utilize some of these integrations to, again, help make sure that your system is going to stay healthy and clean, but also to enrich the data that's available there. There are too many integrations really to list out, but I pulled out 4 that we've seen that can often be very helpful in keeping these organizations up to date and clean. The first 2 on the left side of your screen are a little bit more about data enrichment and standardization. So LinkedIn, which of course is owned by Microsoft as well, has a very strong integration to Microsoft Dynamics CE. The LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a great option because it will essentially match up your contact records with LinkedIn accounts and profiles, which can help enrich that data, make sure that you're getting accurate information. If someone changes a company, helps you be able to see that, and then also be able to create relationships with other contact records that you have within CE. So who knows who, relationship building, everything that LinkedIn is very good at doing, pulling some of that into the Microsoft Dynamics CE contact table. Now, the next one down there is called Dun & Bradstreet. Some of you may have heard the full name. Some of you may have heard some of the abbreviations related to them. DNB or DUNS, D-U-N-S, are going to be some abbreviations that they utilize. This is a third party. It's a company that essentially gathers and collates information on companies and businesses across the world. And what they do is they not only collect that information, things like number of employees and market cap and industry and all of that other info, but they standardize it and they provide every single company with a unique DUNS number. Where this can be extremely helpful is if you have a large number of accounts, especially if you're in areas such as manufacturing or financial services or others, and you can essentially bump up your data against the Dun & Bradstreet database to get a unique DUNS number, find where you might have duplicates, see where maybe one company is a subsidiary of another, and again, enrich some of that data so that you're not relying on users to manually fill in some of that information that they may not always have access to, or if it changes, may not always think to go back in and update that within the CE environment. And so it's essentially kind of farming out some of that update and some of those items to this company where that really is all that they do. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, these other 2 integrations, these really are different items that you can do to help make sure that you are going to be avoiding having duplicate information or just a lot of clutter within the system. So on the top, we have Copilot for Sales. That is the Microsoft Outlook plugin that goes into CE. What this allows you to do is open it up within Outlook. It's going to search through your CE environment to see if the sender or any of the recipients are contact records, if those contacts or accounts have any open opportunities to them, and it allows you to quickly and easily track the email, get summary of the email notification. New features for Copilot even include drafting response emails back to customers that you can then tweak and send out as it needs to, or you can create CE records directly from within Outlook. But the idea behind it is we want to be able to surface the CE information out to people where they're working. That way we can make sure that information is getting entered into the system, it's being entered in accurately, and that we're avoiding duplicate efforts as it goes through. Finally, the last one, SharePoint. This is a long-standing integration that CE has had. SharePoint is a document management repository, and there's an out-of-box integration that comes with CE that allows you to essentially plug in and create SharePoint folders automatically for different records. But if you're an organization that stores a lot of different documents, really all the way across the board. What that allows you to do is to have a single place that's visible right directly on your record within CE, where you can store those documents, open them, work with them, download copies if you need to. But it's all about making sure that you have accurate information, you put the work where people are. And I do want to, hopefully, if anyone is having any other technical issues or anything else, please make sure to let us know in the chat. If you can't see the presenter slides or anything else, just let me know. All right, so moving on to this next section, we have the configuration of your system. So this is going to be really taking a look and identifying what in your CE application is custom, what's out of box, kind of what's been done. I've worked a lot of times with different companies where actually I don't think for any of my companies I never set up my own CE. I always came in as an admin to a company that already had Dynamics. Sometimes Dynamics was in a great place and it was heavily used. More often than not, it was a little bit of a mess. And I was coming in to really try and clean that up and improve the system and make a better user experience and better data quality. So a big part of that is understanding what's new, what's old, what's out of box, what was customized, kind of what people did before you really got into there and looking at the system. So right before we jump into that, I think we're going to hit our next poll question here, and that is going to be asking how often does your CRM team, whether that's one person or it's a whole team of people, how often do you assess your custom configurations to make sure that you're aligning with your best practices? Either frequently, occasionally, never to my knowledge, or I think the case for a lot of organizations, you don't necessarily have someone to do it. This is one of those items that it's really easy as you're kind of answering this. It's really easy for it to fall into the background. CE application, and the great thing about Microsoft Dynamics is that it is very configurable. You can add a lot of things in. It's pretty easy to add a new field or a view. But just as important as you become more mature within your platform is also understanding when to clean things up, when to take it away, when to evaluate whether or not something is still necessary. And that can be really critical to the health of your overall application.
Love it. It's like the phrase of, it's always been done this way.
Right? Oh, I love hearing that because it means that we can do better. You're right, when we're talking to a client and they say that.
Yeah, that was my experience too.
Okay. Oh, this is pretty good. I think half the folks do it at least occasionally. That's fantastic. And we're going to run through a couple of slides here that just help you see how to do this, right? For those of you that never have before, maybe those of you that have a few easier ways to check out some of this information so that you can see what's been customized. So number one, something to be very familiar with if you're not already, is the Power Platform Maker Portal. This is really where, as a consultant, right, I do almost all of my configurations within CE through this portal. It's our primary site to make any sorts of updates or changes to anything within Dataverse. So that can include fully custom tables, new columns, adjusting system views, updating forms, some of the automation processes, so getting to your workflows, your cloud flows, updating model-driven apps, right? Just about everything Microsoft has consolidated into this one single platform. Because of that, it's a really great tool to be able to go in and look around at it and understand what's been installed, what changes have been made, and what's been included within your application. So anytime that you go into the Maker portal, and we might jump into this depending on how timing is looking here in a little bit, one of the things that you can always go to is the solutions area of the Maker portal. And a solution, really high level, is essentially it's a package of customizations that comes into CE. Solutions can be really small. They can have a single field in them, and that's it. Or they can be huge, massive, right? They can be entire solutions. Something like field service is a solution package that gets installed from Microsoft. And you can have Microsoft-specific packages. You can have third-party ISVs. You can have with Microsoft partners, the stuff that I do oftentimes is all within a package, and we can install that into the different, into your environment. But what's good about taking a look at these solutions is that it gives you the opportunity to kind of see what's been installed, right? You can see if there's maybe 5 solutions in there, you might not have a whole lot of customizations. And if they're all Microsoft owned solutions, then you know it's pretty much all out of box. However, you might see 50, 100 solutions, depends on how long your org has been around and kind of what the practices have been. Each one can have, again, a small or a large number of changes. And that's going to be a pretty good key to understand really how much work has been done on these applications and what all has been customized. I will put a quick caveat out there to say that that's not a foolproof way to check. There are organizations where you can just basically go into the default solution and just do all of your changes there. It becomes much harder to track what changed in that case. And we just got a question from Michael asking about making changes in individual solutions or the main solution. My recommendation from a best practices, first of all, is that you have both a development or a sandbox and your production environment. And you want to make any change that you're going to do in your sandbox first so you can test and validate it. But then by doing that, what it also forces you to do is you may put your changes into smaller solutions from the sandbox that you can then pull over into production. It really helps enforce that you're using solutions as a package to move items that solve a particular thing that you need. And that could be project specific. We need to add these fields and do this to support this new process. It could be sprint defined for any organizations that are using more of an agile methodology, right? If it's more IT focused for your CRM development, you could just have one solution per sprint that you do. But I do recommend having smaller packages. Everything ends up in the default solution at the end of the day, so it's always there. But having smaller packages, unmanaged solutions that you work through is a good way to be able to go back and kind of see what was included with a change or an update. So the Power Platform Maker Portal, great place for you to be able to go in and basically just kind of see essentially all of the different changes that have been made to your organization and go through. And just real quick before we go through, another question here of make a solution per entity or per update. I typically will do a solution per update, right? Per sprint, per project. That could include 1 table, that could include 10 tables. Kind of depends on the client and what we're working with. But you can absolutely package those things up together into solutions, and that's a good way to see what's been customized within your system. Now, the next one, it kind of goes down a little level, right? But it's a little bit more specific, and that is just a real quick glance, in case you've never seen it before, at how you can tell if a specific field or an option set value is customized within your organization. And there's a couple little tricks that actually make it pretty easy to do that. Again, there's going to be caveats, right? There's going to be exceptions to this. It would be too easy if this was a hard and fast rule. So you can't necessarily take this direct, but it's going to work in 90% of cases for you. So first of all, talking about columns. Anyone who's been working with CRM for a long time, right? This is a field. This is a column or a specific field that's on your table. Anytime that you add a new field into your CE application, it's going to get a prefix assigned to it based off of whatever solution you're working in. If you're working out of your default solution, you haven't done a whole lot, with CE before, and you don't have a specific publisher set up, which we're not going to go into all of that. You're often going to see just the prefix new underscore and then whatever the field name is. So new underscore account code or new underscore rating. Whatever that field is that you're going to do, it's going to have that prefix there. If you have no publisher, it says new. However, if you're working in a publisher, so for example, we have a publisher we work with called Forvis Mazars, and our prefix that we have set up is FV. So what you'll see here is underneath the account type field on the left side picture is you'll see that the schema name, that second column, says FV underscore account type. Just by taking a look at that, I can tell you, number one, this is a custom field. Number two, that this is a custom field that was put in as a part of a Forvis Mazars solution of work that was being done. So sometimes we work with customers that have worked with multiple partners or have installed other ISV solutions, right, that have certain sets of fields or automations or other things, web resources that come in. Being able to check that schema name is a great way to get a quick glance at kind of where it came from so that you can dig in a little bit further. You can see the other in the second column, the other fields that we have on there, they do not have a schema included within that. And that's because those are out of box fields. Things like the actual value, actual close date, parent account ID. Any of you CRM folks, you might be able to guess this is the opportunity table that we're working with here and looking at. All of those are out of box fields, so there's no prefix on there. Again, not a hard and fast rule. You will see out of box fields that are prefixed with something like MSDYN or MSN. Microsoft does occasionally use it, but usually other custom ones, you'll see the new or a much weirder looking prefix that comes into there. The other one that you can usually tell if there's custom values or not, and this again gets a little bit further in, are going to be option sets. So option sets are drop down boxes that you can put within the field. A lot of out of box option sets are included within the system. If you think of something like account type is a field that's often brought in, and that account type could be a customer, a prospect, a vendor, supplier, right? You could have a number of options. In this case, this is actually a status reason field that you see. So status reason is an option set on a record. So what you could have is an out-of-box field that has a set of options, but you might want to change those options and what's available. And so again, that's something where the field might look out of box, but there is some customization still to it. And it's important to review those and understand and see where they are. A good way to be able to see that and to be able to tell is that the custom option set values, the ones that are out of box typically that you see, are usually single digit numbers. If you look at the canceled and outsold in the screenshot below, canceled has a code of 4, outsold has a code of 5. Now, if you look at the top 3 choices, those have much longer numbers there. 918-320-000, 004, 005. Those are going to be the custom option set choices. And what happens is it's very similar to the prefix for those custom fields that we do, in that when you go in and you add an option set value, if it's a custom one, your publisher actually defines that whole big first set of the string, the 918-320-000, and that's going to be the code for the first choice you put in. Then the next custom choice you put into that set, it's going to be 001 and 002. And so again, you can even tell if there's an option set field, you can say, all right, I know these are out of box option set choices. These were added by this particular publisher, and maybe these ones were added by another publisher. So again, it's for any of my fellow millennials out there, right? Imagine a star going across the screen. The more you know. This is really about just understanding where things are coming from so that you know what was changed and why, so that you know whether or not you need to fix it and clean it up and make sure it's going to work for you all. All right, I'm getting too verbose, I think. I need to clean this up and move a little bit quicker here. So I'm going to hit these next couple of items kind of at a high level, and then I'll pass it back on over to Lauren to finish up here. So the other kind of admin center, aside from the Maker portal that you can use, that's good to become familiar with is, and I apologize because I did not change the name on this. We want to actually be looking at the admin portal for Power Platform, and it is admin.powerplatform.com is the URL for it. I apologize that I missed that update on the slide here. But what this does is it lets you pick major different system settings. So that's things like enabling big maps for your organization, search settings. There's a lot of new stuff with Copilot. If you want to turn on or off Copilot suggestions on your forms, that's a request we've had a fair amount, right? Some of those suggestions aren't quite ready for prime time yet. You can turn them off through here. But more importantly, you can also take a look at analytics and capacity usage for your environments. So that's going to give you charts and information on any failed API calls, workflows, plugins, how many users are accessing your system, how many processes are happening on a regular basis. It's going to give you essentially all of that technical detail that oftentimes when a client comes in and just says, stuff's not working, right? It's not failing, or it's slow, or we're getting told we're over capacity. this is really our first stop because it gives you a great overview of what's happening within the application. And if you find that you have processes or plugins that are failing on a regular basis, half the time they're failing, that's going to be something that you need to double check on. You need to see, why is that failing? Does it need to be updated? Does it just need to be turned off? Sometimes you have these old processes that aren't really doing anything for you anymore, but they're still running, and then they're failing, and then they're creating log files, and then they're slowing stuff down, and it becomes a whole thing. So again, understanding even where you can clean up, where stuff isn't needed, where you need to make some tweaks. Maybe it's just altering when that workflow triggers. Maybe it's going all the time and it doesn't need to. All of that can help make your system run smoother and cleaner, and also helps you understand kind of what's happening behind the scenes, because it's not always easy to see where some of those automations are occurring and when they're running, or even when they're failing. Oh, so you can at least see a screenshot here as an example of some of the analytics that you can see. So these show some active call or active users, API calls. This gives some information on passage rates for things like plugins and codes that are running through. And then you have your capacity. So this can show if you have a whole lot of audit files, right? If you're auditing a lot of different fields and tables, usually good to clean those up on a regular basis. If your workflow jobs are saving logs all the time, they probably don't need to. That's where things like bulk delete rules, where you can say delete anything older than 90 days or 120 days, can help kind of keep that clean as you go through. Or this can help you identify that, hey, we have a whole lot of emails with attachments and it's not necessary. Let's maybe push all of those into SharePoint because it's a much cheaper, right? It's a much more affordable and cost-effective way to store some of that data. Last one I'm going to touch on, actually, yeah, almost last one, I promise, is third-party tools. There's a ton out there. A lot of them live on something called XRM Toolbox. I could do a whole webinar series on XRM Toolbox. If you are a CRM admin, you have never used it before, it is worth taking a look at and checking out. Tons and tons of free tools that you can use. We'll do a quick screenshot of one after this, but it's going to let you do cleanup on views. You can reassign views from users to yourself as the admin, which is great for cleanup. Set different user settings. And we'll see an attribute usage one right after this. Another great tool, which is actually a web browser plugin, is called Level Up for Dynamics. It's been around for a long time. I think it's a pretty consistently used one within the community. But what it does is it gives you a little button in your browser, works on any Chromium-based browsers, so Edge, Chrome. I'm pretty sure it works on Firefox as well, since that's Chromium-based now. But it gives you a bunch of options on your form. So if you look at a form, you can actually have it show you those logical names of the form, or showing all the different option sets and what are the different values that they can be and what's the code behind it. What business rules are running. It even allows you to impersonate another user if you're an admin, if someone is having an issue, and you can try and impersonate it and see, is it a security issue? Is there something else weird going on, right? Maybe business units, a lot of different choices and things that you can do. So a great tool for admins and folks to utilize. From a health check perspective and a data perspective though, XRM Toolbox, I do like to give a shout out to this tool. I love it. It's called the Attribute Usage Inspector. What it does is you pick a table and it will go through every single column on that table, and it will tell you how many records have data within there. Not to pick on a sales team or anything, right? But I've had a number of times where I've worked places and they've said, we need to have this field. It's critical, right? We got to have it. It's got to be on everything. And everyone's going to fill it in because it's everything we need. And you put the field in, you wait about a year, you take a look at your records, and it turns out that only 2% of them have a value within there. And everyone's been pretty fine. Or you say, hey, here's this field. I don't think we need it. And someone says, we do. We can't live without this field. We have to have it. And there's 3% of records maybe that have a value. It's a good tool to have, right? It's an arrow in your quiver to be able to go back to the business and to say, do we really, right? Is this something that we need? Or how can we, even on the other side, how can we encourage better usage at this point based off of this field, because we're not getting the type of usage that we want to see. And now truly my last point here is going to be, this is an important one, is service accounts. So I'm just going to take a minute here because when it comes to the health of your organization and your environment and being proactive, this is probably one of the biggest things if you don't have a really robust CRM process built in. It's probably one of the biggest things that you can do that's going to save yourself a lot of headaches down the road. Workflows, cloud flows, a lot of different things within the system, duplicate detection rules, all that sort of stuff, are owned by a user within the system, right? So I create a workflow, it is owned by me by default. You don't usually a lot of times see the owner, but it's there and it's owned by me. Now, what happens if I leave? Well, my user account gets disabled, and then every single process that I own turns off because I'm no longer an enabled user. That's a major issue for organizations, right? If you have one admin and they've done all of this stuff for them and then they leave, it's going to shut down half of your stuff. So utilizing what we call a service account, which is going to be a generic account that has, just service at, companyname.com, whatever the case may be, or CRM at companyname.com, allows you to make sure that any of your processes or any of those core behind the scene items are owned by that service account. And then whoever is working has access to those credentials. But that makes sure that if the person who's working on your CRM admin team or a marketing person or IT, whatever the case may be, if they leave or if they get disabled for some reason or something else happens or they win the lottery and they just say, peace out, right? I'm gone. You want to make sure that you don't lose access to the automations and the processes and the things that are happening. So having a generic user that can own those is an extremely helpful thing to do, and it's a very proactive thing to do. They do require a full license, right, if they're going to be a system admin, so there is a cost associated with that. But if you don't have it and it causes problems down the line, I almost guarantee that that cost might be more. So pros and cons to it, but definitely something to consider. All right, with that, I've talked for way too long in a row. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Lauren here to run through kind of the data auditing side. So thanks for being patient, Lauren.
Nope, that was great. Thanks, Tom. All right, so yeah, now we're going to get into kind of the last part of this webinar, which really is auditing your data. So we've talked a lot about setup and how to, adhere to best practices when you're making changes or when you're reviewing the back end of your site. And Tom touched on a few great tools that will help with data auditing. So now we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth, doing some data audits using some out of the box dynamics functionality, discussing how to perform that data audit, duplicate detection, how we can set that up in a way that is helpful, and then just identifying inconsistencies in data across your application. But first, we're going to have a polling question. So which tools are you using to support data integrity? So again, Tom just went over some, and we're going to go over some here in just a minute. But we have A, out-of-the-box tools such as duplicate detection, merging, bulk delete, etc. B, consistent manual checks and reviews. C, nothing at the moment. Or D, A and B plus more.
Lauren, I've never used the XRM toolbox attribute usage tool, but oh my gosh.
XRM awesome. Toolbox is awesome. Very, very powerful.
That's a really cool one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually more on like the marketing automation side. I haven't been a CRM admin in a hot minute. But wow, that's fun. I like that one.
Yes. Yeah, I've known about it for a long time, but at previous roles we never used it. But I mean, it is an incredible tool to be able to use if you're able to, and something that I do talk with a lot of clients about.
Nice. Results are up.
All right, so it looks like a lot of you are either doing consistent manual checks and reviews, which I'm sure is taking a lot more time than you wish it did, and maybe isn't as thorough as you wish it was, or you're doing nothing. So hopefully some of the tools Tom went over and some of the tools we are about to go over will be helpful for you and your application. Okay. So data auditing. So what do we do when we do find that we have duplicates or there's just some inconsistencies within our data? So we try to set up parameters and have things in place so that that doesn't happen, but inevitably it does. So we need to address it and fix it, and then hopefully have processes in place going forward so that this doesn't continue to happen or doesn't happen as often, maybe. So this is probably something that if you've worked in Dynamics for any amount of time and you have any duplicate detection rules published, you may have seen this pop up. And what I find is that a lot of users, when we start working together, they've seen this pop up and they ignore it every time because they're not exactly sure what this pop up is doing or why it's interrupting their day, or how it can be helpful to them. So let's talk about duplicate detection. So there are certain duplicate detection rules that are created and published just out of the box in Dynamics. And a lot of those are really helpful, but some of them may not apply to your organization. So I would recommend, if you're a system administrator and you haven't looked at your duplicate detection rules, or that's just not something that you guys have enabled just yet, take a look back there and see what's available out of the box, and then kind of think through, especially if you're one of the ones doing those manual checks, think through, where are we seeing a lot of duplicate data, and are there rules that we can either create or that have already been created and just need to be published, and then go ahead and get those implemented. But then also make sure you're training users on that and letting them know, hey, when you see this pop up, here's what to do with that pop up. So again, creating and publishing duplicate detection rules is only the first part. The second part is actually when you see those duplicate detection pop-ups, merging the records. It's a very quick and easy process if it's something that you're aware of, and it really does save a lot of time and cut down on the duplicate data. So let's take a look. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this works as expected. Let's see. All right. Hopefully you can, oh, you can't yet. Let me click the share button. There we go. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen at this point. It should be Dynamics, my open leads. And then when we're here, if you were to come in and say, all right, I'm going to create a new lead. Maybe we met someone recently at a trade show and we want to create a lead for them in our system. So this is really just the out-of-the-box lead form. I'll come in here and I'll just say, met at trade show, interested in services, whatever our fake company might offer. So I will enter in the first name, the last name, and let's just say I got the email, thankfully, so that I have some contact information. And that's all I have for right now. So this is what I was referring to earlier. You don't want to make any fields required that users may not have just yet. So when we save it, I'm going to have this duplicate detection warning pop up. And that's because it's already found something that I've set up in the background. It found a record in there with that information already. So because I set up these duplicate detection rules, I know that it was searching based on the email address. And what it's telling me is, hey, you already have a lead in here with this same email address. So do you really want to create a new lead for the same person? So then I have a couple of options. I can ignore and save, and that is going to say, I want to ignore the fact that I'm creating a duplicate or a potential duplicate. I'm going to save this record anyway. Or you can select the records and say merge. This is based on security rule, but assuming you have merge permissions. And then from here, you can see it's going to by default show you any fields with conflicting data. And you'll notice my current record, I didn't put in a lot of information, but it looks like either myself or maybe a colleague did put in some additional information about this lead. So maybe I'll say, well, this is really the same information. So I'm going to keep this record that it found. So what I'll do in that case is I don't even need to merge it because I haven't created the record yet. It prevented me from creating the duplicate. So there's no need to create or to merge the record. So I can just click back and cancel, and then I can navigate away from my lead, discard my changes, and then I can just say, well, show me all of my open leads. And then I can say, oh yeah, that one is already there. So then I can follow up with maybe my colleague who owns this lead, or maybe I forgot I already created this lead when I got in from the trade show last week. And I can continue working on this lead without having to worry about that duplicate that I almost created. So that's just one example of a very simple duplicate detection rule that you can set up, especially when it comes to leads, because sometimes you have leads in the system that you've followed up on a couple times and they're just not somebody you're actively pursuing right now, but you've left them in the system. So if you were to meet that person again and go to put them in the system, you can say, oh, I've already worked with this lead. Let me take a look at the historical information I had for that lead. So again, duplicate detection is helpful for, the goal is that you would search for a record before you create it. We know all the best practices, but the reality is we're all busy. And so if you don't have time to search or you forget to search, having these duplicate detection rules published are just one more safety measure in helping keep your data clean. All right, so Tom is going to talk about table keys for a second, and then we will continue with the rest of the slideshow.
Yeah, so just in case best practices fail and they ignore the duplicate detection rule and everything else that they're supposed to be doing, you can set up what's known as a custom table key. This is kind of related to the duplicate detection, but it's a much harder validation that comes along with it. Kind of like a GUID for a record, what you can actually do is you can set up a custom key for any table within CE, and it will force uniqueness on those values. So let's say that it is email address on a contact. You can set that as a table key, just the email address. And if anyone, including a system admin, tries to create a new contact that has the same email address, it will not let the save process. So it's not something that someone can ignore and still save anyway. It doesn't necessarily give the merge options. It just says, this is it, right? There is no way, you can't save it. It's not going to happen, no matter what you do. It's a unique key down at the table level of the database. Again, pros and cons to utilizing this. You want to have a good, strong business case for it. You need to have unique values across everything and make sure that you're going to have a value in that field for all of your records. But it is a great way if you do really need to enforce an absolute unique value. You can do a custom key on one or a combination of fields on your table, and it'll go through and process it. So another good option if you're ever curious or looking at doing that.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. All right. So data cleanup. So bulk deletes. It looks like the images aren't keeping up with the slideshow, but bulk delete use cases. So bulk deletes isn't something I'll spend a ton of time on because it's pretty self-explanatory. You can delete a bunch of records at once, and there are very specific use cases for when you would want to do this, because deleting a bunch of records at once also sounds kind of terrifying. If you've worked in Dynamics for any amount of time, you know that deletes can be really bad. But bulk deletes can be really great in helping to clean up storage, managing the consumption of your system storage, and just making sure that you're really only storing records or information that you actually need to be able to reference and that you need to store. So some examples of that are if you have email messages or notes with attachments that are larger than a certain size, maybe having the system do a bulk delete of that, either a one-time bulk delete, or you can schedule those on a regular cadence as well, or maybe disqualified leads that are older than X number of months or years. So if this is a lead that you disqualified 6 years ago and they're still in your system, does that lead need to be taking up space? Chances are that lead may have new contact information. They may even work for a new company. So just different ways that you can clean up the data that is in your system using out-of-the-box Dynamics tools. Then we have data auditing using views and dashboards. So this is one of the easiest ways, and this is something that I often set up for clients. It's just building views that audit records based on how your organization has determined that records need to be maintained. So if you have certain fields that maybe aren't required just based on the business process, it doesn't make sense to require them, but you've trained users on best practices, maybe you have tip text on your fields so that they know what to put here and maybe when to populate this information. But you can also kind of keep an eye out and help users maintain their data using a data audit dashboard. It's just a series of views that you add to a dashboard. And that can be a dashboard that you, as the system administrator, keep an eye on. You could share it with those users so the users can kind of see their unclean data and clean it up as they go. You could share it out with managers, whatever makes the most sense. But I will share my screen again really quickly and just kind of show you an example of what this could look like. Again, this is something that I really just created with a series of views. So you should see my screen here, and I have this custom data audit dashboard. And again, it's nothing that it's not very robust to build out. It's just create a series of views. Here I have leads that are older than 6 months. In general, a lead should be a temporary record and something that we're either qualifying or disqualifying. So leads that are older than 6 months, open opportunities that are past the estimated close date. So if you said this opportunity was going to close on August 1st, and now it's August 20th and it's still open, maybe you need to have, reevaluate that. Maybe it's time to close it, you just haven't, or maybe that estimated close date needs to be pushed out. Activities with either no due date or that are past due. So again, you said you were going to make this phone call last week. You did, but you forgot to go in and add your notes and mark it complete. So that will just remind you that that's something that needs to be managed. And then accounts with no primary contact or contacts with no company listed. In some cases, for some organizations, it doesn't make sense to require the account or to require the contact on the primary contact on an account. But if for your organization it makes sense and you notice that that's something that users are leaving blank often, and you just want a helpful way to remind them, hey, these are things that you need to keep an eye on, the data audit dashboard I find is, again, really simple, but also really effective and very helpful. All right. Lastly, the data management checklist. So these are just some good best practices just to ensure data quality throughout the life cycle of your business and how business processes change. So data modeling is something that we do. It's something that is very helpful because it allows you to design it out first. So actually write it out, draw it out, build it, make sure that you know what that data is going to look like before you start building it. And then once you get into configuring, you're ensuring that data is usable and it's what users need to be able to reference as they follow that process outside of Dynamics.
All right, so we are right at the top of the hour. I think we had some great questions come in, so thank you. But we are on our final polling question, and that is, would you like to connect with a Forvis Mazars Business Technology Services professional to discuss Microsoft Dynamics 365 CRM applications? So we'd love to keep the conversation going. So please, by all means, check yes. Just not ready at the time, that's okay too. But obviously you saw today we have some great tools in our toolbox. So again, we will wrap up here, and any questions we didn't address, we will follow up with you via email. So again, thank you for your time today.